So that one time I was in the Antichrist camp, they mocked me in a variety of ways. But one of the things they said was that I was going to spend my life as a slave to Christ, that I was following a set of arbitrary rules and living my life in an arbitrary way based on a hoax, and that I was a slave. Whereas they, in contrast with the pagan enlightenment, were free. And I've seen this sentiment regurgitated a lot from atheists and anti-Christians online as well. So I thought that today I'd have a discussion with it, especially as we are now celebrating the Passover, which commemorates the Exodus, the greatest deliverance from slavery in human history. I want to discuss the contradiction of submitting to God and how God is the only way that you can experience true freedom in your life. But first, I would like to debunk the notion that Christians and religious people in general are less free than atheists because they like follow rules or something and like submit to a god. And the shower allergic redditor atheist typing this argument out probably doesn't realize that the fundamental fabric of the laws of whatever country they were currently reside in was based on mythology and religion in general. And I can make a video about this another time, but like kind of yeah, like all like kind of morals like frameworks are based on, you know, a deity or like some kind of myth telling us what to do. So it's kind of contradictory for them to be claiming that we follow the laws when they themselves like, you know, I don't see them in jail. Even if we pretend that humanity came up with morality by itself and that, you know, there was no god who like told us what to do for anything, that's, you know, fair enough. But even then, you still like if you're still following those laws, like you're still like a slave. Like you, it's not like we've got. It's not like Christians have their yokes on their backs while atheists are like soaring in the clouds. They do whatever they want. You know, like, you know, we're on the same like level. There's not much to gloat about. You know, like us being enslaved when, if anything, we're just more honest about who our master is while you're still in denial. On a more fundamental level, though, not just on a legal like everyday sense. I do truly believe that all people, religious or non-religious, I believe that all people are slaves, or may I say sheep, to something, whether that be God or money or lust or greed or, you know, the you know, popularity or, you know, dopamine. Everybody desires something in this world, and everybody wants something. Even narcissists, so like egomaniacs, you know, who you'd argue they don't have a true master because they don't listen to anyone, they serve themselves, which is wrong because they are serving their ego and that they are serving their massive pride, which needs to be fulfilled. Because if they were truly serving themselves, they would live a, you know, productive life, not like self-destruct themselves with their, you know, nonsense and cooperate with others. But no, because the ego, you know, everybody is like a slave to something. Like that's kind of, I feel like that should be undeniable. So it shouldn't be that big of a stretch for religious people to instead look to something greater than this world that is supposedly all good and all wise to serve instead. So is that I think it's very clear that atheists have no actual high ground on this, you know, like idea of freedom and slavery, where, you know, we're all together, you know, like you're in the same cell block as me. And I think that it's a very contradictory mindset to think about, and it takes like 2 seconds of thinking to like devalidate. But now I would like to go to the other extreme and argue that religious people are actually not slaves and that they are actually, you know, free, and that the concept of deliverance from slavery and freedom is fundamental to the Christian belief. So much so that the greatest dark retelling of the biblical narrative is centered around the idea of freedom. My first point will be set in the like framework where God isn't real and, you know, religion is a hoax. There's no higher spirituality, and even then, as ludicrous as an idea that is, even then, religious people are more free than the average atheist. Because when I describe our masters, our shepherds, like, you know, money, lust, and, you know, our egos, those are, even though we may not be having, even though we may not be physically tied up or like, you know, in the fields like working for some asshole, these are mental yokes. You know, we are still in chains somewhat. These are, you know, So basically, this is a psychological form of subjugation. So if you truly believed in a god, regardless of whether it's not real, the actual concrete facts don't matter. It's all in the psychology. If your handcuffs are mental, then the keys are mental too. And if a person had you know, complete faith, you might pull an Ecclesiastes and realize that, you know, nothing about this life truly matters. If you were within that mindset, and if you fully dedicated yourself to the idea of a higher realm and a higher, you know, father to bow down to, then money and stuff, they just wouldn't matter to you anymore. And so you would actually be, you know, freed. And I don't think this is a very difficult concept to grasp. Even the fear of death, which has plagued all life for as long as life has existed. You know, like death is the ultimate enemy, but obviously religion provides an answer to that. And whether it's true or not, if you were on your deathbed and you fully believed that this was not the end, then fear of death would not overcome you. And I would argue that the fear of death and fear itself is it's a master to many people. You know, like a lot of our actions are driven by fear. However, when your father is a omnipotent and sorry, when your father is an omnipotent, benevolent, basically when your father is omni-man, that means that, you know, no fear required, because, you know, heaven, like obviously it's more complicated than that, but, you know, promised land, you know, there's nothing to fear. This life is important, but not really, because it's like, because it is a speck of your life, basically, like, you know, compared to eternity in heaven, unironically a bit like omni-man stay on earth and invincible. Like, this is crazy. To quote the 8th chapter of, you know, Paul's letter to Romans, you did not receive a spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you received the spirit of adoption, by whom we call Abba. So yes, even if God is not real, God can still save people. Like the idea, like obviously a common argument against you know, religion is that it's just comfort, and even though that's not true, it kind of is. Like, even though I believe that there's truth to it, at the end of the day, like, it just kind of helps people sleep at night. And so obviously, even if God isn't real, he has improved like the mindsets of, you know, many. And even the non-existent God can liberate people from the, you know, earthly masters. But now I'm going to move on to the framework where the hypothetical God is real, i.e., the real world. And I would like to identify the biggest subjugator of humankind today, which is sin. And it's kind of undeniable. Even within a secular framework, psychology will claim that our brains are wired to serve ourselves, you know, first. You know, like both religion and science, like they kind of agree that we're just kind of like, you know, we just suck. We cannot help but sin. Even people as great as Moses, Elijah, David, you know, Jack Black, they couldn't stop themselves, and no one could, apart from one man in history. It's Jesus. Yeshua bar Yosef is considered the ultimate perfect example, and to be honest, again, even if, you know, the Gospels aren't true, the character presented in them is kind of a good role model, I'd say. But more importantly, assuming that Christian theology is true, Jesus Christ is the way. Whomever sins is a slave to sin, but the truth will set you free. The idea is that if you understood just a tiny bit of how beautiful God and life truly is, you wouldn't even need to sin. This is why in the promised land free will still exists. It's not that you know, we become hardwired, or who we become in the promised land fundamentally changes. Like, it's just not that. The beauty of the beauty of God's presence will just eliminate the idea of sin from our minds, because we would never even think to do it, because sin is fundamentally tied to our earthly vulnerabilities and our earthly desires and stuff. So, yes, the idea of being removed from this kind of environment, like, you know, and put into the kingdom of heaven, that will liberate us from this, you know, great powerful master, which is sin. One of the greatest things that calls us to sin is, you know, peer pressure and the desire for approval, the desire for popularity, you know, being powerful, this, you know, impressing, you know, your love interest or whatever. And like, again, I just think that, you know, a lot of us, me and self included, I've disgraced myself in the I've disgraced myself in the past just for a few chuckles from, like, degenerates. I've put so much of my self-worth based on, high school popularity or something. But when I turned to Christ, none of that mattered anymore. Like, I'm going back to the secular framework where God doesn't exist, because, like, it just doesn't, matter. It's the mindset. If you truly believe in God and you believe in He's your Father and He's everything that the Bible and the church say He is, then He's the only person you need to impress. And even then, the Bible claims you don't even need to impress Him. He just loves you. Regardless, you are suddenly freed, as I was, from the desire to, you know, like, be liked, or, like, seek the seeking the approval of sinners, seeking the approval of man. If I were to loosely quote Galatians chapter 1, verse 10, if I was still trying to impress people, I would not be a servant of Christ. Would Yeshua truly want me to disgrace myself by chugging down ludicrous amounts of alcohol, or would my friends like me to chug down ludicrous amounts of alcohol? This is the basic idea, and this ties back to the larger issue of sin, because obviously, while the Bible promises freedom and liberation from the concept itself, just the motivations for sin, the reasons that this master has such a strong hold on us, the chains that sin dresses us with, they begin to degrade because of pure faith. And I want you to know that with the faith of a mustard seed, you could move mountains. Your life will fundamentally change for the better if you are able to apply this mindset. If you just, like, disconnect from the expectations and the pressures of this world. Like, that is true freedom to me personally. Even when we get onto a literal level, we humans, we are slaves. We are sheep because we are, like, for example, the laws of physics, like gravity. We are vulnerable human bodies. We're gonna die someday. And again, the Bible promises answers to all these, and as does other religions. Like, just fundamentally, factually, we are tied down. We are tied down to the earth, like, literally. The Reddit atheist will yap about how stuck to the floor I am while, I'm flying above him during the rapture. Obviously, I don't think I'm guaranteed a spot in the rapture. I still have a lot of work to do, and nor do I think that all Gentiles and non-believers will be disclosed from the rapture. I did make a video about this anyway, but it was just like a stupid joke I made up on the spot. The point is, sinning, doing bad things, is trying to achieve power in this world, is an active form of subjugation, which Christ objectively sets us free from. He is the liberator of our lives. I want to get back to the sheep metaphor, because as we know, Christ referred to his followers as sheep. They heard his voice and they followed him. The book of Isaiah describes us all as sheep who have been led astray, and this is, consistent with the Tanakh's continuing narrative of, Israel and God's people prospering and then disobeying him, and then not prospering. All of us, we are objectively limited. We're on the ground, we can't fly, we can't lift up mountains, most of us can't even get laid. And so, regardless of whether there's a God or not, there are objective forces that are stronger than us, like, gravity and light and time and stuff. And obviously, within a Christian framework where there is a sentient, all loving being that controls all those things, he is the master, he is the true shepherd. But sadly, this world has distractions and temporary pleasures which are their own masters. So it's not a case of Christians are free and then all the Gentiles and the atheists, they're enslaved. Like, no, we are all serving masters. We are all sheep, helpless by ourselves in the field. It's just that some of us are wise about which shepherd we go for. Christ is the one true shepherd. He is the one that will show us the way, while the other shepherds, the thing is, the problem with the other shepherds is that they're alluring. They lead us, they're idols. They promise the easy answers, the very quick pleasures, the instant gratification, like porn, or like hurting people, or chasing paychecks. They will give us they will show us the easy paths, like the pleasant paths, and they're shorter and they're quicker, and we're gonna follow them. But then it leads to the butcher's house, where we get touched up by someone who looks like he was on the island, and then we end up on some spoiled brats, plate, and we are no more free than Eren Yeager. But whereas the idols will lead us to the plate, Jesus will lead us to a seat on the banquet. We will share the supper with him as he did with his disciples. He gave us a tease of what it was like to be in the kingdom of heaven. And now you can experience that kingdom today in the church, in the book, and in your heart. But the problem is that Yeshua's path, I'm sorry, I keep switching the names interchangeably. Like I'm referring to Prophet Muhammad for real. Christ's path, it's got full of brambles, it's rocky. The weather in that direction sucks, and like it's longer. It just like you just wouldn't logically go there. And the sad thing is that the religious life is a promise of hardship and persecution. But if you trust in God, if you endure, if you're willing to see past and invest in your future in a way, if you're willing to put in the effort now and seek the harder plane in life, God will split the sea for you if you put in the effort. He will free you from Egypt. A wonderful thing about the Torah is that it shows us what the religious life is like with an entire um, group of tons of people, an entire nation of people, and like these miracles that Yahweh performed on our behalf, and th- and it's incredible. We have access to this story. We can read it. It's the most well-selling book in the entire world. And then and I'd imagine that most of us kind of have one. And even then, you can search it up online. We can study it. We can actively learn how to be liberated. The chains are non-existent. We have the keys, but they're just a bit too inconvenient to reach, and so we don't want to. We want to continue chasing the paychecks and the women. But if you're willing to cross the desert with God, then you will see his wonders, and you will meet it in the promised land. You will be sanctified and blessed through Jesus, for you are one of his sheep, who hear his voice and follow him. But most importantly, you must always remain humble. Though you may have escaped your own yokes, you need to still have your eyes turned to the other people that are still enslaved. Even the most, disrespectful atheists out there, the ones that, you would rather just get away from. As St. Paul wrote to the Galatians, you were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another, walk humbly with love. Do not become complacent as Israel has done so many times in its history. We have the knowledge, we can be better, and we can create the kingdom, a kingdom that lasts this time, if we just remember to be thankful for who liberated us and who is our new master, a father, a teacher, someone who deeply loves and cares for us. The baby birds in the trees that are developing their wings, they have two choices. They can either remain in the comfort and safety, live an easy life for now, and don't develop the wings, because why would they? The life in the tree is safe and it's good and there's food. But there's also the bird that keeps running out the tree, keeps jumping off, hurting themselves, injuring themselves, taking the hard path, like just deliberately for no reason, and everyone calls them superstitious. They can't actually fly. It's stupid. But then the bird that was complacent and lazy later on in the future, that they don't have the ability. Whereas when the time is right, the bird that put in the effort, the bird that chose the difficult path, the bird that chose to trust in something that seemed impossible, the entire sea will split for them. And I don't think that metaphor makes sense. They will soar with the wings of freedom, Shinzo wa Sasageo. There are times when I just want to run outside and like scream to the world that I'm free, but then I'll like get arrested again. So yes, I think that I've kind of like established that Yahweh will set us free. I don't know. I forgot what I was talking about. The more observant of you will have noticed that I have like been promoting merch this entire time that I think I just got from my older brother, to be honest. I'm not sponsored by WTF1, even though I like their content. But speaking of sponsorships, there's this really good game out there called Raid Shadow